Welcome back to Video Marketing Made Simple. I'm your host, Vicki O'Neill. Today, I have a wonderful guest with me, someone who is a LinkedIn expert and someone I greatly admire for all of her expertise and how she shows up authentically as herself on LinkedIn. I want to welcome Brenda Miller with Miller Marketing.
Thank you so much, Vicki. I'm really looking forward to this conversation today. And the way you think of me with LinkedIn, I think of you with video and video marketing. So it's just such an honor to be on your show.
Oh, thank you so much for saying yes. I know you are super busy, have a crazy busy schedule. I know you have an event coming up this Saturday from the time that we're recording this episode. So I know that you have a lot going on with that. And I do want to first commend you for all of the value that you provide on LinkedIn, which of course is free to anybody who is on LinkedIn, or if they search on Google for anything that you're talking about will also come up in the search results. But you're always kind, you're caring, you always deliver value, you're quick to respond, you are promoting other people. And I just think that you are setting such a great example of not just how to show up on LinkedIn, but how to show up on social media in general. So I want to commend you for that.
Oh, thank you for saying that. It kind of reminds me of if you're a parent, you can relate to when you drop your kids off someplace else and then you come and pick them up and they're like, your child was so well mannered and such good manners and good, very polite, very conversational. They made good eye contact, things like that. I'm happy to hear that because I try to teach the same techniques to my audience that I use myself, which is how do we be a good LinkedIn community citizen, so to speak, and just a good person, a good human being all around.
Yeah, you're doing a good job. So I definitely wanted to make sure I mentioned that. So once we got to the end, I didn't say something like, oh my gosh, I forgot to mention this after we stopped
Uh-huh.
recording. Okay, so before we dive into the questions, if you could share a little bit with our audience about who you are, what you do, who you serve, that sort of thing.
I would love to. And thank you for asking. So, my name is Brenda Meller. I'm an independent marketing consultant who specializes in LinkedIn, which means I help people use LinkedIn more effectively. One of my catchphrases is I help you to get a bigger slice of the LinkedIn pie. And pie is part of my personal brand. I love pie. I'm talking about the baked dessert here. And it's one of the things that you don't a lot of people aren't like affiliated themselves with pie. Like you got the coffee people and the craft beer and the sports people and whatnot. But pie is like part of my personal brand. And a lot of times when I'm talking about getting a bigger slice of the pie, it's depending on what your goals are. For one person, getting a bigger slice of that LinkedIn pie might be finding more clients. For another person, it might be just growing their brand and visibility. And a third, it might be a job seeker trying to find a new opportunity, which really addresses the communities and the audiences that I serve. I work both with individuals who are self-employed, coaches, consultants, service providers, solopreneurs, small business owners. I also work with organizations and I do team training to help organizations with expanding their personal brand presence and their company brand presence on LinkedIn. And then I also serve the job seeker community, individuals who are looking at amping up their LinkedIn presence so they can be found by more recruiters, and also how to use LinkedIn more effectively, more actively as a job seeker so that they're not just relying on that black hole of job search. And I really have a great time doing it. I come from a corporate marketing background, so I'm always thinking about who is your ideal target audience. And then I understand the psychology of LinkedIn as well as the algorithm. So, why do they care? And how are these techniques going to help us to come up in more searches and to stay in the homepage feed longer? Or what are the techniques and things that we might be doing that could be hindering some of those results? So, that's a little bit about me.
And there's so much there that we could unpack and dive into. And it really goes along with what I said at the beginning, how much value and just how you're constantly serving the LinkedIn community. And I know one of the things that people struggle with, at least I've seen it, people comment on it, I struggle with it sometimes too, is about when we're spending time on social media. And of course, in this case, we're talking about LinkedIn, it's a completely different animal than like Facebook or Instagram or even, of course, YouTube. But it's all about forming a community and just engaging with other people. So, what would you recommend is one or two things that somebody who might be new to LinkedIn, whether they're an existing employee with a corporation or if they're thinking about starting their own business, what are like one to two things that they could start doing right now to start establishing a presence on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I think it's really important that you think about who is your intended target audience that you're looking to connect with on LinkedIn. Because what I hear a lot of people say is that they're overwhelmed. LinkedIn feels like this stiff corporate event and they have to have a corporate voice, and it feels a bit intimidating, especially if you're coming from a more friendly, relaxed environment like an Instagram or Facebook or other platforms, and you're now coming into LinkedIn, which feels like a corporate world. So don't let that dissuade you. Instead, I want you to think about there are corporate types for sure on LinkedIn, but there's also a lot of people who are independently employed, who are a little bit more eclectic or a little bit more relaxed and fun. And you get the spectrum of people that are on the platform. So right now, LinkedIn has 1 billion members, and they're in over 200 countries and globes from across the universe. The great thing is LinkedIn is a professional networking site, and it has such a high degree of credibility. When we look at some of the other platforms, it's a little bit more social. Here, it is a little bit more professional. So there's a lot of credibility that comes along with it, and you can use that to your advantage. So start by building your profile for your ideal target audience, and don't let that feeling that LinkedIn is only for corporate types prevent you from getting active. That's my first tip. Can I give maybe one more?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's do
So the
it.
next thing is like ease into it, especially if maybe you have a LinkedIn profile, but you haven't been active on LinkedIn for years, or maybe you're just starting a LinkedIn profile and you're not even sure where to start. This is the same advice I give to every single client when I'm first starting to work with them. If they're not active on LinkedIn, start by spending 15 minutes in the LinkedIn homepage every single day. And we all have 24 hours in a day. Vicki, you have 24 hours. I have 24. We neither of us get more. We all get the same amount of hours in a day. And if you're spending a lot of time on some of the other social platforms, instead of going on Instagram first or TikTok first or YouTube first, go on LinkedIn first and spend 15 minutes in the homepage. And what you're doing is two things. First is you're getting more comfortable and familiar yourself with the platform and how people are using it. The second is when you start to interact with those posts, whether giving it a like or reaction, adding a thoughtful comment, reposting, those types of things, you're telling the algorithm, these are the types of things that I want to see more of. Because if you haven't been active in a long time, you might come into the homepage and it's just a lot of random nonsense. It's from people you don't really know and with a smattering of inspirational quotes and some ads here and there. And you're like, this isn't even interesting to me. Well, we have to get more fine-tuned. It's almost like if I were to walk out back in the backyard, Vicki, and if I've grown a garden, I planted things in the beginning of the season and I haven't tended the garden all year long, I'm going to have to pull some weeds until I find those tomatoes and cucumbers that have been growing. So we got spend a little bit of time in the homepage feed, giving it some attention, interacting with the things that interest us, and maybe even unfollowing and removing some things that aren't interesting. And then it starts to become more relevant for you.
That's great advice and a great way for somebody to get in there and actually start telling the algorithm that they're present and that
Mhm.
they're active and they're interested in connecting with other people because they're showing activity for doing that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, do you have any different? So, going into the fact that you and I are both introverts.
Mhm.
So, I don't know, does that ever surprise people when you tell them that you're an introvert?
Introvert is not a character flaw. It's a description of how you get energy and how you need to refuel your energy, I think.
Mhm.
So introverts can still be very outgoing. We can be really great public speakers. We can speak in front of large audiences. We can be around a lot of people. But after we do so, we're going to need some time to kind of decompress and go in and sit in a quiet corner and maybe check our email and be heads down and things like that. But it's not necessarily that you can't be an outgoing person as an introvert. It's just understanding how you recharge yourself. And even like Vicki, I find as an introvert, when I'm around other introverts, I get more energized. As sometimes being around extroverts, they're great, but I can sense like they have a higher energy level. I feel like they're at a different energy level and you can sense it. And I remember once I was reading, I think it's called The Secret, where or maybe it was a different one. No, it's not The Secret. They were talking about auras and people and their colors of their auras. And I remember reading it going, oh, that person must be like a red and I'm a green or something. I just felt like we were vibing at different levels
Yeah.
because they were an extrovert. And as an introvert, it felt different to me. And it wasn't like I didn't like being around them, but I could feel that the energy level was different. So I think it's embracing it and giving yourself permission. I think there's a lot more people in the world that are introverts than are extroverts. So maybe I'm wrong on that, but I feel like there's more of us introverts. So it's just something that you just kind of harness and embrace, really.
Yeah, that's a great point too, because a lot of people have said that to me too. And I said I'm an introvert. And then I'm like, are people really thinking I'm an extrovert? Because I can show up on camera and I'm confident I can, present whatever I'm talking about well. But then they don't realize like what goes on beforehand, like before I press record or after I'm done, recording. It's like, oh my gosh.
Right.
Sometimes I'm just like, I need to take a mental break, even when I'm at home by myself. So it is a lot about energy and like connecting with other people. Do you think that introverts struggle any more or less than extroverts, or does that matter at all when you're on LinkedIn because you're just engaging mostly in the posts?
Yeah, I'll speak from experience. For myself as an introvert, I liked the fact that I could go on LinkedIn and connect with people from across the world. It's not quite as awkward posting and engaging with people as it is sometimes when you walk into a room and you don't know anybody there. If you can relate to that. Like you walk into, let's say you go to a conference and it's like all of your industry peers are there. You don't know who's in the room yet, so you can't see any familiar eyes to lock and walk across the room to see. And everybody looks like they're talking to someone else. You feel like you're the only one. You feel like you're an island that's floating inside the room. And what do you do as opposed to on LinkedIn? You're like, well, just go post and then interact with people. I feel like it's a lot easier to interact as an introvert in an online space than it is in an in-person space. And actually, the online activities help when you're in person because then people come up to you. Oh, Vicki, I've seen your videos all the time. It's so nice meeting you in person. You're like, in your head, you're like, I don't know who this is, but you're like, oh, I'm so glad. So it can help to become a conversation starter for you online and then help you when you're in person as well.
That's a great point too. It can actually soften that because it helps people get to know, like, and trust you better, whether you're posting text or images or videos or whatever. It's information, right? You're starting to establish yourself as a thought leader. So anytime we can do that ahead of time, it's going to help create that engagement earlier in a conversation, especially if we're going from like online to in person.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So tell me about, I know that you're sharing content on other platforms as well. Tell me about those platforms and then why you decided to kind of branch outside of LinkedIn.
Yeah, great question. So my main platform was LinkedIn. And back in the day when social media first came on the scene, I was like anti-social media. Like all of my friends were getting on Facebook and they wanted me to, I'm like, I don't want to do this Facebook thing. It just seemed social media seemed really odd to me. So LinkedIn was the first platform I got on, but eventually I did come around to getting on Facebook. And then it's like you discover this whole world of people that you aren't interacting with on LinkedIn. And for me, Facebook is more friends and family. I don't accept friend requests unless I know you very well. And I used to say, if I feel comfortable sharing pictures of my family with you, but now I also say, if some of my beliefs align with you, and I'm not going to get into too much detail here, but if I don't feel like we share the same beliefs, I'm not going to interact with you on Facebook because I don't want to jeopardize our friendship nor business if we don't share some of the beliefs because I openly share some of those in Facebook. I'm also active on Instagram and I created an Instagram account on a personal level when I was back in corporate. And it was really very similar to Facebook, friends and family only. When I launched Meller Marketing and really started leaning into it, this was back in 2017, 2018, I was learning a lot more about Instagram and I was trying to figure out, do I have a personal? Do I have a business? Like, how do I manage this? And the person I was learning from at the time, they said, think about 5 years from now where you want that Instagram account to be. And it's okay to have a personal, have a business. I'm like, oh, okay. So it gave me permission. So my Meller Marketing Instagram account is very similar to LinkedIn, but confines to the rules of Instagram, the square photos, the videos, things like that. And it's a little bit more conversational than LinkedIn. Now, I resisted TikTok probably similarly to how I resisted Facebook back in the day. I'm like, I don't want to do this. All the kids are. And then during the pandemic, my daughter wanted to do some dance videos with me. So we started doing a TikTok account just to do some fun dances and things together. And then I noticed some of my peers starting to do other videos, and you were one of them doing other videos on TikTok. I'm like, well, maybe I need to lean into this and give this a try. So I'm there, and naturally, I've been on YouTube as well, posting videos. It has created a video library, and Twitter and X. I'm dabbling. I keep waiting for the dumpster fire. Is it going to blow up and implode upon us? But I do find that going on Twitter, there's a different audience. There's a slightly different vibe. So for me, I'm comfortable being active and bouncing around. I will say during the workday, Vicki, I'm mostly popping in and out of LinkedIn. I really don't go on Facebook until the end of the day and Instagram till the end of the day, unless there's something I'm promoting and I'm waiting for responses back, or there's an ask I have out on a personal level on Facebook and I'm waiting for response back. So I don't really go out there. But my advice to all of your viewers and listeners is pick the network where you think a majority of your audience can be found, but also don't limit yourself to just one network. In my case, I'm a LinkedIn coach. I want to train people how to use LinkedIn more effectively. So it would make sense that I'm active on LinkedIn, but I also want to appeal to people who maybe aren't using LinkedIn too much. So it does make sense for me to be active on Instagram and be found on in searches on YouTube and be found in searches on TikTok. So I am making myself accessible there because I'm trying to bring people over to LinkedIn who maybe aren't knowledgeable and are a little bit apprehensive about using the platform. But I think everyone's got to figure out for themselves where their audience can be found.
Yeah, that's a great point because I think a lot of people miss the fact that if you're a specialist on LinkedIn like you are, spending time on the other platforms is a way to get people to understand like how to use LinkedIn or the benefits of LinkedIn. And if you aren't spending time on TikTok or Instagram or Twitter, X, or any of the other platforms, then it's really hard to help those individuals know what they might expect coming over to LinkedIn. So I think that's really important. In fact, I've seen yourself included like videos that people are really engaging with because you're on other platforms talking about LinkedIn. People are
Yeah.
interested, they're curious, but if they're not seeing people like yourself showing up on those platforms, they don't know what they don't know. So you're doing like some education to them there too, and just showing, hey, a lot of people still think of LinkedIn. I probably shouldn't even mention this because it's still like reinforcing that seed that it
Yeah.
was the resume
Hmm.
or job finding location, but doing all these other things that you're doing as well on the platforms and sharing more about the value and the connections and the networking and how you can actually have events. You can do live stream. You can do all these things
Yep.
on LinkedIn that people may not have known unless you and others who are on LinkedIn and specialize on LinkedIn are talking about it over there. So I'm sure that people appreciate that. I know I do because
Yeah.
it's good to see.
Yeah, if I could add something too, and speaking of like LinkedIn as a job search platform, I think a lot of us have that in our mind because back when we first started LinkedIn, it was because LinkedIn marketed themselves as an alternative to Monster and Hot Jobs, like as a jobs board. And then you could also build up your profile. So they were taking the best of both worlds, the Monster Hot Jobs job listings and then the Facebook having a personal profile, and they mashed them together. And even right now, if you open up the LinkedIn app, it says networking and careers or something. I think careers or job search is like a primary keyword that they use in it. And LinkedIn is a business, so they need to make money through the platform. Many of us, most of us, are using the free basic version of LinkedIn. They're trying to get us to upgrade to premium more and more lately. And they do make money on job postings. So they're trying to get the large companies with many job postings to pay through LinkedIn Recruiter. And they also make money on marketing solutions, on advertising through the platform. So it would make sense that what you're seeing from their marketing efforts are promoting the areas of their business that they make money on. But the reality is, Vicki, is that more people are using LinkedIn for professional networking purposes than are using it for job search purposes. And if you've built your profile the right way, that's appealing and speaking to your ideal target audience, it doesn't look like a resume, then you don't have to worry about that. You can just be focused on the messaging that you want people to have about you.
Yeah, that's a great point too. And it actually is like a portfolio of your work and your efforts in trying to connect with people and the value that you deliver too. So instead of it being like a resume or a profile place where you can house all of your work history, it's now becoming more of a place that you can share all of the work that you've done. And almost like an artist has, if they're going to present all of the work that they've done, that portfolio, that's essentially what LinkedIn has become.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to shape it that way, though. That's the thing. You
That's
gotta
right.
gotta and keep it going. And just like an artist will take new pieces in and out of the gallery based on trends or themes or things like that. You have to tweak and modify your profile. It's not just a set it and forget it. I think definitely keeping current on there, adding new items into your featured section, periodically reviewing your about section, updating your header image at least once a year. So just making sure that things are kept fresh because there's a good portion of people on LinkedIn, Vicki, that are I like to call them readers, not lurkers or stalkers. Like people sometimes, I've been stalking you on social. I'm like, you're not stalking me. You're looking me up. You're researching me. But
Yeah.
there are many people, especially on LinkedIn, who read. They consume. They look at things. They don't ever hit that like button or comment, either because they have their own internal hesitations or because they don't want people to know that they're active on LinkedIn, their boss, their clients. And a lot of times, especially higher up you go in the organization, if you start getting active, all the salespeople start to swarm you. Oh, look, this person's active. We're going to start to come in and try to sell to them. So a lot of people do find you're going to find them in the impressions, which are people that have viewed your posts and your profile and things like that. And you're not going to see them in the likes, reactions, and comments and replies. But those are the same people, Vicki, that will come up to you at an event and say, Vicki, I've seen you on video all the time. And to your point, they feel like they know you because they've seen you, they've heard you, and they're like, oh my gosh, I've been following you for years. It's such a great thing to meet you in person. And they talk to you like they're an old friend and you've never met them before.
Yeah.
But, if you're using LinkedIn the right way, I think you can create those great relationships with people.
Yeah, and it's quite possible to do that too. I've had people do that to me at events where I'm just like people that looked familiar. So I'm like, maybe I've seen them somewhere, but then they're just like, "You're Vicki O'Neill, right?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
how did you know that?" And it was because I was showing up on video. That
Yeah.
brings me to another question. Video on LinkedIn or just showing up on video, especially as an introvert and posting them on LinkedIn or any of the other platforms, like how important do you think that is to like your personal brand, or if you're working for even a corporation, you're an employee for somebody else, like how
Yeah.
important do you think video is to show up online?
Well, I know the answer you're hoping for because both you and I feel the same way about video, which is video is a really great mechanism and platform for people to hear you, to see you. They get your personality, they're going to learn from you. But the reality of the situation, Vicki, is that there's many people who just aren't comfortable with video at all. And that scares the bejesus out of them. They would rather do public speaking than do a video of themselves, or they'd rather go to the dentist than do public speaking or do a video of themselves. And I accept, and I always tell people I'll meet you where you are and I'll take you where you want to go. Now, if you don't want to go on video, I'm not going to steer you towards that path. If you want to go on video, I'll give you some tips and techniques on how to do so. And there's so many things that I've learned from you. So hopefully the people that are listening, watching this podcast, listening to this podcast are following all of your great techniques. But one of the things is I learned about CapCut from you.
Yeah.
And now when I'm out walking my dog Pepper and I'm doing like short 15, no more than 15-second clips at a time, because that's about as much as I can remember before I start messing up what I'm saying. And I don't ever script things. I think about here's the main point I want people to get out of it. I want to keep it under a minute or less. The more video that you do, the better you get at figuring out what you want to say
Mhm.
and what does a minute feel like, or what does 15 seconds feel like. So for me, I cut together 15-second clips and I lace them together in CapCut and then publish them then afterwards. Now, I say this and it makes it sound like the easiest thing, and you're in your mind visualizing, oh, I know what you're talking about. You're uploading and you're doing different things. For somebody who's new to video, who's never done video before, that might feel very intimidating.
Mhm.
And that's a normal reaction. Now, Vicki and I are not new at doing video. We were all there once too. We all started at the same point with learning video. But I will say, if you want to get better at something, you have to practice. And the good thing is, you can record a video, and if you don't like it, you can delete it. You do not need to post a video. You do whatever you want to do. But if you're open to it, I think video can be a really great way of supporting your brand, growing thought leadership, and really helping people to understand your personality, which is going to really amplify your results on LinkedIn and on other social platforms.
Yeah, so many great points there about video. And I understand that too, that there are some people who are just not comfortable with being on camera. They don't like themselves on video. I will ask that those people who are just like nodding their head or saying, yes, that's totally me. If you think about being on video, not I'm not trying to push people in this direction, but just to consider it, is that if you do enjoy public speaking, to imagine how long and how much effort it would take to reach a mass audience. So everybody who you want to connect with. And the amount of money, the amount of your time, the time away from home, your family, your kids, whatever you have going on. And then also just to get asked or to even have that opportunity, right? Because it's really hard to get in front of people on a stage unless you've got a relationship or a reason to be there. But when you can show up on video, you can reach the masses without being asked.
Yep.
And as an introvert, you don't have to worry about the energy side of it. So you can create those videos when you've got the most energy. So, like, I'm a morning person. So I'm best creating videos in the morning before I start getting tired. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the energy just gets drained.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot more benefit to that in creating awareness of who you are and trying to establish yourself as a thought leader in that way. And then actually being on video is going to help you get public speaking opportunities too, because people are probably going to say, have you ever done this before? Let me see
Right.
some videos. If you don't have them, it might be harder to get that yes.
Yeah. And for people who are public speakers and you have video clips of yourself, there's ways that you can convert those videos into social media posts as well. So you don't need to do just a you staring at your camera, which might feel really awkward for you. You can
Yes.
get yourself in your natural speaker environment and clip that out and do some things. And if you're not comfortable using the technology, there's so many different routes that you can outsource that to, whether it's finding Fiverr, Upworks, or finding a local video production firm, or someone like
Mhm.
Vicki, perhaps, to help you out with that. There's so many different avenues at doing some of that post production if you already have some video footage as well.
Yeah, and it's never been easier to create videos today just because our phones, the camera on our phones is the same as like professional cameras were
Yep.
like 10 years ago. Plus, you've got all these free editing software, like you mentioned, CapCut. So you can do a lot with video today just from your phone. So
Mhm.
when you and I started, like my first video was back in 2011. So that was like, I would have to, I was also stuck in perfectionism. So it was just a lot more difficult back then to create one video than it is today. So maybe it's going to get easier as we move forward. I don't know how, but I'm sure it will. But there's no point in waiting, right? Just get
Yeah.
started and then create the video. And even on LinkedIn or any of the other platforms too, once you've created a video, you can actually convert that to an audio file. You can create it to shorter clips. You can create it to a text file, images, all those sorts of things. So you can
You just,
repurpose it.
you just give me a really great idea when you talk about your first video when you created it. I bet you and I could both do this. Looking up on our YouTube channel, what's the earliest video that you have of yourself where you're talking and looking at the camera? And I know for me, I don't know, I'm gonna speak for you because I feel like you've always been a video expert, but I know like for me, I was probably pretty rough around the edges, both in the delivery, the audio, the confidence, all those things that are coming out, even removing my ums and ahs. I did Toastmasters for a while to help me with that, but also the quality, having a lighting source behind me instead of in front of me, having a good quality microphone, allowing time for the audience to process what I've just said. There's different techniques. Like you don't just get that from the first time that you do, but I think also if you were to look back at that first video of you or I think you're also going to see some little glimpses of spectacularness in there, whether it's the tips and advice or that glimmer of a smile where you're like, oh, it feels very charismatic. There's something in there that was probably great in the beginning that led us to what we are today. But we got there through hours and hours and hours of practice. Right?
Yeah.
We didn't just drop out of the sky and become great video producers. It takes time and it takes effort.
Yeah, just like being on LinkedIn too, right? So to establish a network, to build your audience, to build your connections and start networking with others on LinkedIn, it takes time. Like you can't go on there day one, set up your profile, do the homepage searching and engagement, and then day two expect to have 100,000 connections and people who are like wanting to send you money and work with you.
Right?
Yeah, it takes time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, do you have any advice for introverts who want to get started, whether it's on LinkedIn or Instagram? Just like what would be a couple of tips or advice that you would have for introverts in particular to
Yeah.
just show up online and get started?
So figure out a community of people who are like you, who are supporters of you, and look them up and find them. Make sure that you're connecting with them, and also support them. On LinkedIn, what I do is I try to comment on their posts, whether it's a reaction or a like or a comment. I try to engage on their posts pretty regularly. Anytime I see a Vicky video popping up on my homepage on LinkedIn, I'm always going to interact with it. I always support people that are great people and whether they support me or not. Like Vicky does support me, but I'm saying I don't do it because Vicky is supporting me. I do it because I am a supporter of Vicky and Vicky's been such a great resource for me. Similarly, I do the same thing on Instagram, but Instagram's a little different. I try to curate my feed so it's all coming from me rather than reposting other people's content. But what I love about Instagram is stories. I don't think there's any penalty for reposting stories, and it creates social media karma. And there's a 24-hour lifespan of that. I'm teaching my son some different things. He's launching his own business. He's got a car detailing business that he's working on. And he's like, his Instagram, by the way, is refresh my ride. So he's like, can you make sure that you like my post and give a comment on my post? I turned to him and I said, when's the last time you went on Meller Marketing and commented on my posts? And he's like, "Can you share that to your story?" I go, "Can you share it to my story?" Like I'm trying to teach him as a parent
Yeah.
etiquette, social media etiquette. If you want to be a great, you want to have a great profile, whether it is on LinkedIn or Instagram or any that you can't just be, and you can't just expect people that find you. You also have to support and find other people. You have to be reciprocal. And I think community engagement for me, that's when things really started changing for me on LinkedIn. That's when I started to really grow. That's when my network started to really get more followers, connections, and more business. That's when things started to happen, when I wasn't just focusing on me, but when I was focusing on other people and bringing other people into the conversation and spotlighting other people. Even the event that's coming up, and Vicki's one of the speakers for my upcoming Shift Summit, is making the shift from being self-employed to, or rather from being an employee to being self-employed. This whole event, I'm bringing together people to shine the spotlight on them because I'm a belief that a rising tide lifts all boats, and all of us working together to promote the event helps each of us individually and collectively as a group. There's overlap into each of our audiences. And it's the same concept as what I'm talking about here, whether it's LinkedIn or Instagram or other platforms. When you're bringing other people in and you're supporting other people in on those conversations, it helps to build that social media karma up for you too.
Oh, so many great points. Yes. Almost like the do as you want, do to others as you want others to do to you. Same thing
Exactly.
applies to online and social media.
Yep, that's exactly it. Yep.
What is one thing that you want your target audience to know about you that they may not already know?
Hmm. I would say I'm approachable and I've heard every question before. I get so many times people will come to me and say, I'm sure this is just me. And I always say, do you know how many times I've heard a similar type of a question? And it's categorically sometimes the same. I was speaking earlier today with a CFO who had some concerns that are shared by a college graduate when it relates to getting active on LinkedIn. It's like we as human beings are not that much different, and we all have very similar questions and concerns. I always tell people that when I work with clients, I'm very similar to doctors and lawyers. Like I don't tell people who my patients are, who my clients are. If you want to talk about it, you can. But my goal is to make it a comfortable environment for you to know that I literally have a job, Vicki, because LinkedIn is confusing. If LinkedIn was easy to use, I wouldn't be doing LinkedIn coaching. I wouldn't. And they make it confusing. And I think they try to think that it's easy to use, but there's so many nuances. And I always try to train people to get to understand how LinkedIn is thinking so that you don't need to work with me. And it does take a little while to get there sometimes, but it is a confusing platform. And like I said, I literally have a job because LinkedIn is confusing. I'm trying to make it less confusing for you.
Well, thank you for that. Because it is, and especially when you have like constantly changing algorithms too, or at least it seems like the algorithms are changing. If your post all of a sudden gets less views or less engagement and you're sharing the same type of content,
Mhm.
not format necessarily, but the same type of value, and all of a sudden there's a dip. And it's like, what just happened?
Right.
Chances are
I
it
have
was
a
an
question.
algorithm change, but working with you, that would help alleviate that problem. You're like, yes, absolutely.
Well, I mean, I didn't excited. I didn't, but you want to work with me. Yeah. And sometimes it's not just the algorithm, it's a combination of different factors. It's LinkedIn is changing navigation. LinkedIn is certainly changing the algorithm all the time, but also the network is growing. It used to be when I first got on, it was probably, I don't know, 200,000, 300,000 people. Now there's a billion people. So the pie has gotten exponentially bigger, and the slice that you had before is now actually smaller because the total pie is that much bigger that's on there. So the same techniques that you were using that were effective before are not as effective, could not be obviously as effective now because the audience is so much larger. So there's things that you can do to counteract that. And I'll give one tip on that, which is instead of waiting for people to come and find your posts, I'm coming back to my earlier point, go and find them, go and interact on their posts. And sometimes that will prompt them to come and find you, right? They'll come back to it. And the other thing I do is I'm always trying to bring more people in through the top of my funnel. And I do so by going out and searching for people and inviting them to connect. Now, I do have the paid version of LinkedIn. I'm using premium career version right now because it allows me to add a note and personalize every invitation that I send. I make it all about them, not about me. But I know that LinkedIn is prioritizing content from new connections over connections I've been connected to for years. So what I try to do every morning, or at least a few times a week, is before I post, I go out and I send out 5 or 10 or more invitations to new connections who match my ideal target audience to bring them in on the top. And then when they land on my profile and they connect, LinkedIn starts to serve up my posts. So it's
Mm.
helping me to counteract that dip that we're all seeing in engagement over time. And My goal is always to try to serve my clients, to build up more referrals, to be visible and active on the platform. But we all have to work within the algorithm and things that are happening out there. So don't just wait around for the old people to find you, like find new people. I think that's
Yeah.
a way to kind of counteract that algorithm change.
Yeah, and that's really one of the purposes of LinkedIn anyway, is to just build a community and help those that you serve. And because there's new people coming on constantly and there's a billion people already on there,
Yep.
it's almost like you have this never-ending pool of people that you can connect with. So just keep going, keep doing it. It'll just make it
Absolutely.
better. And I will say that for people who are listening or watching, that Brenda did a profile review. I don't know if it was you analyzed my, it was probably,
A profile mini audit, I think is what we called it. Does
yes.
that sound right?
That was the best thing I've ever had for my LinkedIn ever. And I'm not just saying that because you're here. It was
Ah,
because you recorded the whole thing. So you went through and you did, here's banner, here's your profile photo, your about, your headline. Like you were so specific in everything that you were like giving me feedback on. You were telling me the things I was doing well. You were telling me here are the things that I should change. And it was all so extremely helpful.
oh,
And I don't think I've ever had, no one comes to mind, let's just put it that way,
yeah,
of anyone else doing something like that to the degree that you did.
yeah.
And to me, it felt like you went above and beyond. So
Huh.
I don't think I've ever shared that with you because it was a while ago. But hey, this
Yeah.
was a perfect opportunity to do that. So I wanted to say so.
Well, I'm glad. And we all think about what's our why and what are you passionate about? Like that for me, it just makes me so happy. I'm like, oh, good. What I do does make sense and it does make a difference in the world. It is helping people because I feel like I get so excited about LinkedIn sometimes. And if I could, I would just spend all day just navigating around LinkedIn and just interacting with people. I got to make money. I have to support my business, obviously, as well. So I have to sell some of these services to
Yeah.
stay enthusiastically self-employed, so to speak. But for me, it's almost I'm a mechanic. If you pull your car up to the garage, even before I've lifted up the hood, I know what's the issue with it. I can do a once over on a profile and just in a matter of seconds, I can figure out a couple things. It's just sometimes it's tweaking what you already have. The guts of everything is pretty good, but we become immune to what our profile looks like. We don't think about this word meaning this thing or that word, replacement of things or things like that. So I've got that trained eye. I look at profile, I look at hundreds of profiles every week. And I can tell within just a matter of just a few seconds some things that can help to enhance what you're doing. And even like, is it clear to your visitors what you're using LinkedIn for? Whether you are an employee of a company who's looking for a new job and you don't want people to know, or you're self-employed and you're looking to grow your business to get more speaking gigs, to get more people to buy your video course, to get more people to buy your book. Like, let's make it clear to people. A phrase I often use is it's like marketing on a silver platter. Let's make sure that it's clear and it's evident and there's clear paths for people to do business with us and to help us to achieve our goals.
Yeah. So I would say anyone who's wanting to spruce up or just figure out if your LinkedIn profile is set up the right way to drive the traffic or the goals that you want, to definitely reach out to Brenda because it will definitely be time and money well spent. Before we go, I know that you mentioned that you've got your shift event coming up this weekend,
Yeah.
but I believe that you've got another event coming up after that. Is that correct?
I'm always got events.
Okay,
If
so
it's
where
really
can people
possible,
go to find the latest and greatest events?
yeah, mellermarketing.com/events. I do speak in
Okay.
person and I do offer a lot of virtual events and I've got some online courses. And I will offer one resource to your viewers and listeners, which is I have a variety of free downloadable checklists. So whether you want 15 profile tips for coaches and consultants, or if you're a podcaster marketing your podcast on LinkedIn, variety of different things, company pages, checklists, different things like that. So if you go to mellermarketing.com/checklist, you can see, I think there's like 7 different checklists I have that are downloadable for you right now, and grab as many as you want. And then you'll be able to join my VIP email list as well, where I share updates about my upcoming events and resources and LinkedIn tips as well.
Oh, that's awesome. That sounds like a lot of great resources. I was going through checklists like, yes, I need that. I need that.
Yeah.
So you'll start to see some of those coming from me as well.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Where's the best place for people to connect with you? I'm assuming it's LinkedIn. Is that the best way for them to just search for you on LinkedIn, or what would you say or recommend?
Yeah, I would say LinkedIn is my top network where I am most active. But if you go to mellermarketing.com, you can learn more about me and how I help people unlock a LinkedIn, get a bigger slice of the LinkedIn pie. You can also find links to the social media platforms where you are most active, because I always like to meet people where they are and help them get to where do they go.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. Do you have any final words that you want to share?
I just want to say thank you to you, Vicki, because you've inspired so many of my videos over the years. And often when I'm posting my videos, I'm messaging you or tagging you or, messaging you or emailing you afterwards saying, Vicki, you inspired this. I've got like the two Brenda videos and the different time lapse. There's so many things that you've done that have inspired me. So I just really want to encourage people, if they're not already following you and watching your videos, there's so many great things that you can learn from Vicki. And I just want to say again, thank you so much. It's just been an honor talking to you today.
Oh, thank you so much for joining me. And thank you so much for saying that too. That means the world to me. Like you said, with knowing about with LinkedIn, that
Yeah.
means the world to me to just know that what I'm doing is inspiring action. And I appreciate you sharing that feedback with me too. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here with me today, Brenda. Again, connect with Brenda. I'll include all of her information in the show notes or in the description if you're watching this on YouTube. And I will see you next time. Until then, make today great.